Hey, Facebook Bible study friends and family, how you doing? Glad to see you. I'm glad you tuned in. Hey, if this is the first time you've tuned in, this is the Bryant Christian Church Wednesday night Bible study, and I'm your host, Pastor Brian. So we need to get started, and I'm going to tell you something. I was a little bit, bummed out Monday. I got to looking at what I was going to teach tonight, and I wasn't happy with it. I was like, oh, this isn't that great. I'm kind of disappointed. But I wanted to double check something. So I double checked something, and that led me to a verse. And all of a sudden I went to another verse. All of a sudden I went to another verse. Next thing you know, I'm all over the Bible. And man, I think I got a pretty good Bible study for you tonight. I dug up some new stuff that I've never seen before, and I think it's solid. And I'm pretty excited about getting it to it. So let's just get to it, all right? Get your Bibles out. I want you to turn to 1 Kings chapter 11, we'll say somewhere around 26, 27, 28, somewhere in there. And before I get going with that, we've been talking about the mystery of iniquity. We talked about the Antichrist, the devil's son. Jesus is God's son. The devil's going to have one too. He's called the Antichrist. We've been talking about how he's a copycat, he's a counterfeiter. Anti means before, instead of, in place, and all that kind of stuff. And I want to show you there's some contrast too. But the only thing is, the devil knows how to make contrast even look like the real thing, like a comparison. But the contrast is this. Christ came from above, but the Antichrist ascends from the pit. Christ came into his father's name, but the Antichrist comes in his own name. He likes himself. He's egotistic. Christ humbled himself, but the Antichrist exalts himself. Christ was despised, but the Antichrist is admired. Jesus came to do his Father's will. The Antichrist comes to do his own will. Christ came to save. Antichrist comes to destroy. Christ is the true vine. The Antichrist is the vine of the earth. Christ is the truth. The Antichrist is a lie. Christ is the Holy One. The Antichrist is the lawless one. Christ is the man of sorrows. The Antichrist is the man of sin. Christ is the Son of God, and the Antichrist is the son of perdition. That would be the son of destroyer, Satan himself. And Christ is mystery, godliness, God manifested in the flesh. That's going to be our number one mystery of the seven mysteries. But we're on number 6. Antichrist is the mystery of iniquity, and he doth already work. Satan is going to be manifest in the flesh, and he's going to call his son. Yeah, it's going to have a name, but he's going to be the Antichrist. Now, last week we finished up with Solomon. Today we're going to get into a guy named Jeroboam. Jeroboam. I didn't like this guy at first, but man, I started digging up some stuff on him, and I love it. I'm glad I did. It's so much worth my time. Go with me to 1 Kings chapter 11. The first time he shows up, Solomon likes this guy. Now, Solomon's at the end of his life, and he really likes this guy. And he found out that Jeroboam, it says there in verse 28, that Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. Solomon, seeing the young man, that he was industrious. He's a worker. Solomon saw that in him, and he made him in charge and a ruler over the charge of the house of Joseph. Now, I don't know really who he was or what he was doing, but it kind of sounds like he's in charge of the labor union over there in Israel. So, the first thing we find out is that this guy, Jeroboam, he's not too bad of a guy. Solomon's really impressed with him. That's found in 1 Kings 11:26. But at the end of Jeroboam's life, we find that God has a little bit of a final thought about this guy. And it says in 2 Kings 17:21, 2 Kings 17:21, God said this: Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord and made them sin a great sin. A great sin. Now, sin. I mean, it's bad, but this is a great sin. So how great was it? Well, now we got to fill in the gap. We saw that Solomon liked this guy, made him a leader of a house. And then at the end of his life, God says, this guy's no good. He drove my people to great sin. So we got to fill in the gaps. What's in between those two verses in those two different books there? Let's figure this thing out. Now, as time goes on, after Solomon recognized this guy for what he was, a good worker and industrious and mighty man of valor, a prophet of God came up to Jeroboam and said, hey, Jeroboam, come here. I got to talk to you for a second. Listen, God is not happy with Solomon. Solomon's at the end of his life. He has screwed up with all those 1,000 women that he has, 700 wives and 300 concubines, and they've all led him to worship false gods and different gods. And you know what? God's not happy and God's going to take away his kingdom. Now, he's not going to take away the entire kingdom, but he's going to do something to tell Solomon, to kind of give him a goodbye message as he leaves this earth, that he's going to give you, Jeroboam, 10 kingdoms, because there's 12 tribes, remember? You're going to get 10 tribes, and his son, who Solomon wanted to take over the kingship after he left, because he knows he's at the end of his life, he wants Rehoboam to give it. Rehoboam's only going to get 2. He's only going to get 2 tribes. And so Jeroboam's like, wow, okay, whatever you say, if that's what God wants, and it was what God wanted. Now, we step into how is that likened to the type of the Antichrist. So, we got this. Jeroboam's going to get 10 kingdoms, says God. Now, God took the kingdom away from Solomon's and his son because he worshipped idols. Revelation 17:12 says this. The Antichrist divides, he's going to have a kingdom. And it says that he divides his kingdom into 10 parts. The same amount of parts that Jeroboam has. And let me just read it to you. It says in Revelation 17:12, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. Now, there's all kinds of symbolism in here. Don't have time to go over all that. But the 10 horns which thou sawest, that John saw in his vision, are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but they're going to, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And I think that 1 hour means a year. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. The beast is the Antichrist. There's 10 kings, and they're going to get, each one's going to get a kingdom, okay? And then Antichrist is going to give them his power, and they're going to do what he wants them to do. They have his strength and his power, and they have the same mind. Now, as I look at that, I see some things out there that's going on right now in the day that we live in, and a few years ago. I see, think about prophecy is you can't be exactly for sure what's happening because it hasn't happened yet. You can only sit there and wonder what God's up to. How is this going to be fulfilled? Here's some things that I'm seeing. Here's some things that are out there. I'm not saying this is it. This is the fulfillment, okay? I'm not going to be a false prophet. I want to tell you, as you look at current events and what's going on, this may be how it's going to go down. But Jesus Christ suffered under Pontius Pilate under the first Roman Empire. It would make sense if the revived Roman Empire tried to get rid of Jesus Christ the second time at his second coming. So if you look at what's going on in Europe right now, they are called the European Common Market. When you study the book of Daniel, he's got a prophecy in there. It talks about a beast at the end time has 10 horns. Then all of a sudden, I don't know how it worked out, but all of a sudden he said they had 3 got kicked out, but he still had 10. So obviously somewhere in there, they had 13 horns, which means kingdoms or kings. Lost 3, now they're back down to 10. And the 11th horn that popped up was the Antichrist. And there's a little horn on top of the 10th horn. So Daniel's got that. You can study that in Daniel chapter 7, I believe it is. But if you look at the European Common Market, there's a thing years ago, I think it's 1958, I believe it was, a thing called the Treaty of Rome. And the Treaty of Rome started out, and they had 10 people relatively close to it in time frame, in years, sign up and wanted to be a part of this European Common Market, the Treaty of Rome. They started out with 10, then a few years later they picked up 3 more. 13, like Daniel said. But and Daniel said that 3 get booted out. So they get 10, they get to 13, and they kick 3 out, and they keep 10 altogether. Now, if you look at the European Common Market, you look at their flag over there, it's got 13 stars on the flag, blue background with 13 gold stars. Each one represents the 13 nations that are over there. So that might have something to do with it. Now, some folks think, and I'm not saying no, okay? Like I said, I'm not going to be a false prophet. I'm just going to show you some possibilities to look for as you see things developing in your life. What could happen is maybe the Antichrist is going to divide the world into 10 different parts. And it says that all have a like mind. You can see in America that we are heading in a direction that may not be too favorable for a lot of folks. And it's because America and maybe Britain and Israel are just about the only people that are still a democracy or Republican and capitalist. And everybody else is socialist or communist or Marxism or whatever. And all the world has a like mind. So something's going to happen to America. I'm hoping that it's that first prophecy I told you about where it's just the European Common Market, that he divides Europe up into 10 pieces. But anyway, start looking for stuff like that. Now, another thing that cracks me up is that if you look at a euro, that's the new, Italy used to have the lira, and German had the mark, and France had the franc, and all that kind of stuff. Now they got the European common market, and they got a paper, and they got the dollar bill, or whatever they call it. It's called a euro. And on the euro is a woman who looks a little bit on the sleazy side, sitting on a beast and a bull. Now, where'd they come up with something like that? That's in Revelation chapter 17. We talked about that last week. If you missed it last week, you got to go back there and check that out. We talked about the religion that's coming on in the end times. It's Babylon the whore, Babylon the great, the whore Babylon, and she's a mother of harlots. And what is it? It's a woman, the whore, sits on a beast. Now, can you imagine somebody, the head honchos over there at the European Common Market, come up to some ad agency and said, hey, we need to invent some money here. Let's see your artwork. Let's see your idea on how we can have our money look like. And the ad agency comes up with this idea. Well, here's what we came up with. We got kind of a sleazy woman sitting on a bull. What do you think? I love it. Start printing money tomorrow. Great idea. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. The euro has Revelation 17 all over it. A woman sitting on a bull, sitting on a beast. It's crazy. And that bull is called Apis. Let's get into that in just a second. So we got all that going on. And let's get back to our story here about Jeroboam. Now, the 10 kings go to Jeroboam. But Solomon catches wind of this before he dies. And he wants to kill Jeroboam because he wants his son Rehoboam to get the kingdom. Jeroboam runs for his life and goes to Egypt. Look at verse 40 there, 11:40. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam, and Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So he's hiding out there. That's going to be key here in just a second when we get to looking at this thing here. So now Rehoboam, he's king all by himself, and it wasn't supposed to be that way. God wanted Jeroboam to be at least king of 10 of the nations. Jeroboam's in charge now. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, is now in charge. And he gathers up all his advisors. And he puts the old advisors over here, and he puts his new advisors, probably his high school buddies, over here. And he says, now, what do you think I ought to do when I run this kingdom? Give me some advice. So the old boy says, well, you know what, Rehoboam, your dad was pretty tough. I mean, he taxed and taxed those people. And you know what? If you want to be popular as a new king with all these people, why don't you lower the taxes? They'll love you. And I think that's just some good advice, Rehoboam. Rehoboam goes, young guys, my friends that I grew up with, what do you think? And they said, you know what? Your dad, Solomon, he whipped people with a whip to tax him. Why don't you throw scorpions at people and tax them? I mean, if it hurts to get whipped by your dad, let it get sting by your people. Tax them until they just can't be taxed anymore. Tax them and tax them and tax them. And Rehoboam goes, you know what? I like that idea, guys. That's what I'm going to do. Guess what happened? A little bit of a civil war takes place. And over there in, verse 18, says, then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute. He was the head tax collector, head of the IRS over there. And what they do, who was over the tribute, the tax collecting, and all Israel stoned him with stones. They didn't want to be taxed. They killed the guy when they come knocking on the door and saying, hey, you owe me all your income. The king wants it. Rehoboam says, we're taxing you to death. And they stoned him. And it caused kind of a civil war. And Rehoboam now has to run for his life. But he goes to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was part of the kingdom that God told him that he could have, which was Benjamin and Judah, which is where Jerusalem's at. So now he's hiding in Jerusalem where he's supposed to be. Now his dad dies. Solomon is now dead. Jeroboam gets wind of that, and now he comes back to Israel to take over those 10 kingdoms. And look what he does. Look what he drags with him as he comes back from Egypt. Remember Egypt? Pharaoh and all those gods that God put the whoop on with all the 10 plagues. God whooped 10 different gods. Okay, remember Egypt? They are a picture of the world. And they took over all the religion that the Babylon started in Genesis chapter 11, Nimrod. We haven't talked about Nimrod yet because I wanted to save him almost for the very end of these 18 types of the Antichrist. What does Jeroboam do when he gets back from Egypt? He stayed there for quite a while. Look there in chapter 12, verse 25. It says, then Jeroboam, now his name means contend of the people. He's an enlarger. He's a struggler for the people. Isn't that what people want? You ever hear these campaign promises? You hear these people, I'll fight for you. You vote for me and I'll fight for your rights. I'll fight for you. Yeah, I want to vote for him because he's a fighter. He's going to fight for what I want. Well, that's what Jeroboam does. That's how he gets to the people. He's a fighter for the people, and people want a fighter for them, and they want a leader who's going to fight. And look what it says there in verse 26. And Jeroboam said in his heart, he's talking to himself. He said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. Where's that at? Jerusalem, but that's where Rehoboam's at. Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David, if this people go up to the sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, where Rehoboam's at, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto the Lord, even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Now let me just kind of bring that down to common thought here. He thinks, now here's the thing. In the Mosaic Law, which was written about 500 years ago, Moses wrote this. There are 7 feasts. And the men, I think it's 2 or 3, are expected, and in fact it's mandatory, that all men of Israel, no matter where you live, you have to return back to Jerusalem to participate in those Jewish feasts. And that's where Rehoboam's at. That's not where Jeroboam's at. Jeroboam thinks that if he lets those people go back, if he lets his people that he's in charge of go back to Jerusalem mandatorily by Mosaic law to go back to Jerusalem and have the feast, he thinks they're going to see what a crack job that Rehoboam's doing. He thinks he's going to lose the kingship, and then they'll want to kill him because Rehoboam's a better king than he is. So you know what he does? Look what he plots up. Now here's where he's the biggest type of Antichrist ever. Look what he does. Look at verse 28. Whereupon the king, that would be Jeroboam, took counsel. He gathers his guys together, but you know what? He comes up with this idea because listen to what he says. And made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. I don't want you to go all the way to Jerusalem. Just stay right here. I'll take care of you. You don't need to travel all the way to Jerusalem to worship God like Moses told you to. I'll set up 2 calves up here for you to worship. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. 500 years ago, that exact same verbatim quote came out of the mouths of the leaders over there in the wilderness, 40-year wilderness, when Moses went up to make the 10 Commandments up there on Mount Sinai. All the children says, where's Moses? Where's Moses? Well, we'll just have to worship this God. And they made a god, a god that looked like a golden calf, made out of gold, and it looked like a bull, a calf. And they worshiped it. And God says, Moses, we're done with the 10 Commandments. 40 days is up. You need to get back down to the bottom of this mountain because I can hear music. I can hear singing. I can hear the children of Israel playing. And that word playing there means they were having a sexual orgy. That's the religion that the Egypts did. That's the religion that Nimrod in Genesis 11 started. Okay, it's the Babylonian fertility festivals and religion. And that's what they were doing down there. And God says, you need to get back down there. And because I hear the people playing and dancing and they're frolicking around. You need to get back down there. I told you a couple of teachings ago, I told you in Leviticus 18, it has all the lists of all the things and people and things you're not supposed to have sex with. And it got right down to it that it says all the other nations were doing these things, having sex with everything. little girls, little boys, grown men, and so on. I've been to Pompeii. I've seen the temples over there, and they had rooms divided off, and they had pictures on the wall, and they were still there. They made it through the volcanic ash, and there's pictures of it'd have a man with a man and a man with a woman in a room here. Then they had a woman with a woman. That was what was going on in there. Then they had a big picture of a man and a little kid, a little girl or a little boy. So you know what went on in there. Then they had a picture of a man with a sheep or a goat. So you know what went on in there. Their religion was sexual things, fertility, and that's what's going on here. So he had these golden calves, and he built these things. And this is where I started to look up. I wanted to know a little bit more about these golden calves. I know they came from Egypt, and I know Moses had to deal with this stuff. And we talked about it quite a bit last week. So I looked up, and one of the bulls would be Apis, the man bull. He has a body of a man, and Egypt worshiped an Apis, the bull god. He had a body of a man and the head of a bull. And then they had Hathor, and she was a woman with a woman's body and the head of a cow on her head. Now, where do they come up with this stuff? I don't know. Well, I kind of do, but I'm going to keep it to myself because I have my own ideas. But cherubims, I'll give you a little hint. Fallen cherubims, okay? That's where they probably got the idea. So, this Apis is one of the head gods, and he had the head of a bull. That's probably the bull that they're worshiping there. Apis, I looked this guy up in great detail. And I found out that Apis is the bull god, and he's the go-between between human beings and the gods. Now, wait a minute. Isn't that Jesus Christ? Isn't he the go-between? Doesn't it say over there in 1 Timothy 2:5, it says, "For there is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus." If you want to get to God the Father, you want to get to heaven, you got to go through Jesus, who is our advocate. He's our go-between. He's our mediator. We believe in him, and God says, "You believe my son? Come on in." Apis tries to take on the same spot. He's a counterfeiter. He's a anti. And also, the story behind this guy was he was conceived by the sun rays. And there was a god, the sun god was called Ra, which is where we get our word Ray, R-A, and we say R-A-Y, Ray. But he was conceived by the sun rays. He's got a virgin birth. It's a fake virgin birth. It's starting to line up, folks. Are you starting to get this? Now, another thing that blew me away, I did not know this until Monday night when I really got into this thing here. Apis and Osiris, the god Osiris of Egypt, are the same guy. Now, where the name changed and all that, but I don't know. But it's the same god. I talked about that in pretty good detail last week. Let's go over some more things. Because, man, I'm really interested now because this guy just keeps showing up. Osiris is from the Egyptian mythology. Osiris is the Lord of dead and the Lord of rebirth. Okay? Jesus is the I am the resurrection. This guy is the Lord of rebirth, so he's a copycat. He's also the god of fertility. He's the god of ag, the god of vegetation and resurrection and protection. We're going to get to that in just a second. The god of protection. Now, he's the husband and the brother to Isis. Remember Isis from last week? Isis is also Semiramis. She's also Astarte of the Medo-Persians. She's also Aphrodite. She's a fertility goddess. You know what her symbols are? Remember we talked about Easter was invented way before our Easter was invented. They've always been celebrating Easter as Ashtar. They put Ashtar on their forehead to symbolize that they believed in Ashtar or Ashtart or Venus or Diana. All those, every country had their name, but it's all the same belief, whatever the name was. And they believed in this gal, and her symbols are, get this, rabbits and eggs. Rabbits because they're the fastest producing of bunnies, of mammals in the world. Listen to this. I really got into this thing. I looked this up. You know, mommy rabbit and daddy rabbit decided to get married and they're going to have some bunnies. You know, a female rabbit can have 14 bunnies in one litter, and she can have a litter in 28 days, a gestation period of 28 days. Now, she can get pregnant 1 hour after she's had her 14th bunny. And she usually does. So she can have 13 litters a year at 14 bunnies a year. Do the math. By the time you get to the 4th generation, if she only has 50% female bunnies in her litters, which isn't that hard to do, 50% male or female, okay? By the time she's a great-great-grandparent, she can have 3.6 million babies, grandbabies, great-grandbabies, and great-great-grandbabies. 3.6 million. No wonder they worshiped the rabbit back in those days. How come Easter has rabbits now? You know, they didn't have chocolate back then. And of course they had eggs, and that's a female reproductive thing. So you got that. So you can see how things carried on through traditions and all that kind of stuff. But let's get on with this Osiris here. His brother, Set, was very jealous because this guy here, Osiris, married his sister, and so now it's his sister wife. The other brother that he had, Set, was jealous of that, cut him into 14 pieces. We talked about that last week, and some of you called me back up or texted me back up and said you looked up that 14 fish and you found out a lot of stuff that was in there. But his brother cut him up into 14 pieces. Isis loved her brother so much she went out to find all the pieces. She found 13 but could not find the 14th. We talked about what that 14th piece was. Okay, it was this man, what makes him a man, a fish ate it. And that's why they have Dagon in the Bible. Dagon was the fish god, and they worshipped him. But that's why today in that religion, they symbolize, whenever they practice this stuff, human sacrifices, sexual things in their religion, they'll have a oblux, or a phallic symbol, and just down the road from there, somewhere in that area, they're going to have a domed building, which symbolizes Isis's stomach with the hopeful child from her brother or husband, Osiris, to have the child. Who do you think that child's going to be? Probably the Antichrist, I would guess. Now, here's the thing that blows me away. Osiris is also known as the moon god. The moon god. You know what, folks? Here we go. You ready? Allah is a moon god. Allah, the main god of the Muslims, of Islam, the religion of Islam, is a moon god. Osiris is a moon god. Allah is a moon god. Remember last week I told you when we were studying Solomon that old Babylonian religion is making a comeback. It's a mystery form, but now it's coming and you can see it happening with all this Epstein and Weinstein and all the babies that are and children that are being abducted because of sexual practices that these guys want to get into. The rich and famous are getting into it. It's pretty sickening. But I told you about how Babylon, the mother of harlots, okay? And she's a mother of harlots. Well, guess what? Islam is a part of her little harlot system. It's splintered off. They have a moon god named Allah. He's their head god. Now listen to this. Muslims bow down 5 times a day in the direction of Mecca. 5 times a day to pray and worship toward the direction of Mecca. Mecca is Muhammad's birthplace. At Mecca is the house of Allah, which is also called the Kaaba. At the Kaaba, it's a black square, great big building shaped as a temple, shaped like a black box, and it houses inside that box, it houses a meteorite that fell on the earth. It's a rock that fell from heaven, so they say. Okay, it's a rock. Jesus is the rock. They worship a rock too. It's a rock that fell from space. They're expected to visit Mecca at least once a year. Now, have you ever looked at a Turkey or a Muslim flag? You know what it has? There's so many Muslim nations that are out there, and they all have just about the same flag, different colors or whatever, but it all has a crescent moon on it. Have you noticed that? And inside that crescent moon is a star, 5-pointed star. Crescent moon. Allah is the moon god. Osiris is the moon god that they worship. They may not know it, they may not think it, but that's what it is. They might even deny it, but that's where it is. And what do you think that star is? Wasn't Lucifer the anointed cherub that got kicked out of heaven? He's the falling star. Stars in the Bible are likened to angels. He's a cherub. He's a fallen angel. He fell. God kicked him out of heaven for throwing a coup up there, telling him, I deserve to sit on that throne instead of you. So God kicked him out. These guys bow down and worship a stone that fell supposedly from heaven, and they go around and worship that thing. And then I got to thinking, oh my gosh, years ago in Deuteronomy 32. Now here's give you a little thing that I do. I go through the Bible, and if I really don't understand something, or I don't really believe what somebody teaches, and I think there's maybe something different about it, I'll put it with a mechanical pencil or 2-point, number 2 lead pencil, whatever, something I can erase out of there. I write and I put it right next to the verse, so someday I know God's going to show me what the answer is, and I think I got it Monday night. In Deuteronomy 32, it's a chapter on 2 kinds of rocks and 2 kinds of vines. It's kind of a mystery chapter, but if you go down through there, it talks. Look at verse 4 there. Deuteronomy 32, verse 4, it says, He is the rock, capital R. Now that's Jesus Christ. Then all over the place, verse 18, and then you got verse 30, talks about the rock with a capital R. Then it says this in 31, and here's where we're going to get going. It says, For their rock, little r. Okay, God has a big G, Satan has a little g, God, little God. But their rock, a little r, is not as our rock, capital R. That's Jesus Christ. He's our rock. He's our true cornerstone, and it just goes on and on and on. Okay, He's our rock. Even our enemies, says verse 31, themselves being judges. Now get this. It says, For their vine is as the vine of Sodom and Gomorrah. What was Sodom and Gomorrah? Cities that were involved in violent sexual acts. Babylonian sexual religion. And God had to get rid of them because they were so bad at it. Violent sexual acts. Babylonian religion. It says their vine is the vine of Sodom. Their vine. Jesus is the true vine with a capital V, but this vine, the small v, over there in Revelation 14, it says here the vine of the earth. Satan is the god of this world, it says 1 Corinthians 4:4. Their vine, Satan, is the vine of Sodom and Gomorrah, the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are the grapes of gall with their clusters as bitter. Their wine, now it's talking, it went from vine to wine, because you make wine from the grapes, from the vine. It says their wine, now wine is always a picture of the Holy Spirit of God. Their wine, but it's a little w. So it's a wrong spirit, is the poison of dragons. Who's a dragon? Revelation chapter 12 says that Satan's a dragon, that old red dragon. It says their wine is the poison of dragons, their spirit, okay? And the cruel venom of asps. That's a snake. What snake do you know? Genesis chapter 3. Satan's that old snake. Their vine, their wine, poison, dragon, asp. Did you remember last week when I said that Babylonian whore that sits on a beast, a bull, like the money? You go every time they pay something for over there, they see that sleazy old woman sitting on a bull. Revelation 17, I talked about the wine of her fornication. The wine, her spirit was able to put government and religion into one. That's how he gets control of the people. Okay? Then we drop down there. It gets good. Then it drops down there in verse 37. And he shall say, where are their gods, little g, their rock, okay, in whom they trusted. Oh, they trust in this rock. The Muslims pray 5 times a day to this rock that sits in the Kaaba, the temple of Muhammad, which did eat the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offerings. That's what the Babylonian whore does. She offers everybody that her vine, her wine, or fornication. That's what this thing does. Let them rise up and help you and be your protection. That's what Apis, the bull god, does. He protects his people. And God says, you want him as your protector? Have at it. I want him to be your protector. You want the bull? You got the bull. All right? So there you have all that. Oh, are you starting to see where things are coming together? How the end of times is going to put this Babylonian religion that's been going on and it kind of got spread out a little bit, but now it's coming back together so the Antichrist can show up and take charge and take over. Human sacrifices, blood sacrifices, sexual practices that are wrong and an abomination to God and so on. And all this stuff that's going on. And all these governments have to have the same mind. They have to think alike. And America's in trouble, okay? Because we have to think like them. And we're going to go to war someday. Something's probably going to very, very badly happen to us. And it's not going to be good. that's a great place to stop. I didn't get done. I am not done with Jeroboam. Now, last week, if I had preached this on Tuesday night instead of tonight, I would have only had about 10 minutes. I found all this stuff Monday night. I'm glad I dug it up because to me, it was very, very interesting. Hey, I'm going to give you some clues here before we shut down. Next week, you remember how all these antichrists seem to die a horrible death? You know, when they do die, you know, they get killed by, you know, they get ate by beasts or stabbed with a sword and get their head cut off and so on. Jeroboam's no different. You look over there and, I don't know, look over there. Yeah, we'll look in the 1 Kings 14. He dies, he gets ate by dogs, okay? That's a picture of Revelation 17. The Antichrist gets killed, and everybody who's on his side, it's called the Great Supper of the Gods. All the birds and all the blood-eating carnivores over there are eating the leftover remains of all the people who are on Antichrist's side. Jeroboam's a picture of that. And we're going to talk about how Jeroboam, God punishes him for what he does with these statues. He shrivels up his arm. Remember Zechariah chapter 11? We talked about the Antichrist has a shriveled up right arm and a bad right eye. God keeps saying the same thing over and over again because when the Antichrist shows up, he wants you, who he loves very much, to be able to recognize this bad guy. All right? He loves you. He wants to make sure that you know when this bad guy shows up that you're protected. You can be surrounded by him. Jesus says, I want to be a hen. I want to put my wings around like a hen puts his wings over its chicks. I want to protect you. Jesus Christ loves us. He puts so many stories that when you actually line them up, they're almost telling you the same thing over and over again. Just the name changes. And yet you don't probably notice that when you read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation because they're so far apart in years and chapters and books and stuff. You don't quite notice it until you actually just line these 18 guys up and you go, man, Brian, you're just telling the same story over and over again. I'm not. God does. God does. If Jesus doesn't come back, wait till I get to the 21 types of Jesus Christ. You'll think repetition, my gosh. Over and over and over again, God keeps showing you men that are like Jesus Christ. So when Jesus shows up, you won't miss him because God doesn't want you to miss his son. I pray with everything I got that somebody on Facebook, after listening to me for, 33 weeks now, I guess it's been, that somebody has said, you know what? I want Jesus Christ into my life. I want to get closer to him. Maybe you were saved. Maybe you did, but now you want to start studying the Bible a little bit closer. You're starting to see things. You're starting to see some stuff. You're starting to see, newspaper clippings and headlines in the internet are matching up to what the Bible says, and it now has become interesting to you. And you need to share this message with other people. That's my big hope. That's what I pray for. Other than maybe someone who's lost, that know Jesus Christ, and they need to make him their personal Lord and Savior. Just admit that you're a sinner. You can't do it on your own, and ask Jesus to save you, and he will. It's that easy. And you got to believe in your heart, and then tell somebody, confess with your mouth. Now, we'll catch you next week. That's enough for one night. Thanks for tuning in. Love you very much. I'm excited about next week. We're going to talk about the end of this guy. I think I'll get that done in just a little bit, and then we'll talk about a really, really wicked guy by the name of Ahab, who was married to a really, really wicked wife, Jezebel. Of course, type of the Antichrist. And the woman, of course, is type of the false church in the end times. That's what the women represent if they're married to the Antichrist or involved in him. Until then, keep studying, keep praying, go to church if you can, and just keep loving God, all right? Check you out next week. Bye-bye.